A 1 minute break if you need to get up and get a glass of water. Those of you online, we're gonna get started here in a couple seconds. Need everyone back so we can do our roll call. Hey, Colin, gotta bump those guys out there to get them back in here. That's right. Toke break.
Sorry, can I just say that I'm here? I have to go take care of an emergency in the garage.
Okay, go ahead, Mary Helen. We made the strategic mistake of letting everybody do this. Never been trying to do this.
Went out of the room.
Yeah, I was. Care of my business and got back quickly, and everyone else needs to get back in the room. Well, while people are getting back here, we're gonna go ahead and call to order the April 18th, 2024 meeting of the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District Board. I'm Steve Fancher, your host and chair. It is 2:13 p.m. Let's go ahead and do a nice slow roll call, and maybe we'll have everyone back by the time we get through.
We're close. Nancy Hendrickson.
Here.
Steve Fancher.
Here.
Eric Mueller.
Here.
Dave Ritma.
Here.
Ashton Simpson.
Here.
Lori Stegman.
Here.
Emerald Vogue is out. We will catch her. Corky Collier.
Here.
Rochelle Altman.
Here.
Mary Helen Kincaid indicated she's present. Tanny Staphenson.
Here.
Eric Molander.
Here.
Ed Washington. Bob Salinger.
Here.
Heather King.
Here.
We will have 14 when Emerald rejoins.
Excellent. Thank you, Wendy, and thank you all for dedicating the time. We have an action-packed, action. We have some votes today, quite a few votes, packed agenda for you. First thing, take care of business. Let's consider the March 2024 meeting minutes. We have the minutes from the March 12th special meeting on page 2 of your board packet, and on page 4, the March 21st special meeting notes. Hope you got to take a chance to take a look at those, and I would entertain comments, edits, a motion to accept.
Mr. Chair, I would move to accept the March 12th and March 21st special meeting, 2024 special meetings minutes as submitted.
Thank you, Eric. We have a motion from Eric Mueller. Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you, Rochelle. We have a motion from Eric and a second for from Rochelle to accept the meeting minutes from the March 12th and March 21st meetings. Any comments on the motions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item number 3. And before we get there, I do want to mention really quickly, I'd like to give, so Allison's with us, Allison Keene. I just want to give you a quick chance to provide some comments about the upcoming May 1st TSCC bond hearing. And this is going to be useful information for all of us. If you don't mind popping on and letting us know about that.
Hi there. Sure, I'd be happy to. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. As you know, you have a TSCC meeting coming up. TSCC stands for the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission, which is an Oregon statutory creation and it is an independent and impartial panel of citizen volunteers with expertise in government finance and finance in general. And they've been established to monitor financial affairs of local governments. As the general counsel for Metro and the City of Portland's Urban Renewal Agency, for many decades. I have sat through and participated in probably about 50 of these hearings. And there's a few things to note. First of all, it's a hearing of the TSCC. The board is there answering questions as sort of as a witness. It's the TSCC's meeting, and they supervise many local governments' budgets or bond measures or both. They have about 30 to 50 to get through in each season, depending on who is putting forth what budgets and what bond measures. So it's quite a regimented process. I almost liken it to a play. There are roles, and it's not an ad-libbed role. The TSCC provides its questions in advance, and they will send those to you through your staff. And they expect written responses to these questions. Those written responses are then read at the meeting when they reread their questions to you. There is not much that's off the cuff about these meetings. And that's partly so that the meetings go smoothly and so that nobody is caught unawares. Also, because they're asking questions about budgets and bond measures that are strictly governed by Oregon law and in the statutes and in bond measures cases, the Oregon Constitution, they don't want anyone really going off script and saying things that may not be actually correct, that might need to be corrected at some other time because there is no other time. This is the one meeting. So at every TSCC meeting I have been to, board members or counselors or commissioners are assigned by the chair or by staff or something, the answers to the questions, which staff have drafted because they're very factually specific, either regarding the budget or the bond measure and or staff and or activities that staff are responsible for. So the questions are sent out, staff drafts answers. If there's time, they're given to the board early or not, and someone assigns who is going to read each answer to each question. And the TSCC meeting proceeds sort of like a play. Some of you may, I think the board has already, the Urban District Board has been through one TSCC meeting. The reason that the legacy boards have not is because they're not under the TSCC's jurisdiction. They are too small, or they have no property tax funds that are sent out to on folks' property taxes, because the TSCC is in charge of overseeing any things like bond measures that will go on people's property taxes. If you're assigned, if and when you are assigned to any questions to answer them, you'll be reading the answer. If you have comments about your answer, please don't ad lib them, vet them with staff beforehand, and make sure that whatever is being read has been vetted and has any changes that need to have been made prior to the hearing and have been approved by those who have the facts about it. I know, let's see, let me think of some other questions that I've heard over the years. When I talk about no ad-libbing, you're there as a representative of the district, not as a particular counselor or board member who is debating it, but rather as the district board who is basically explaining to the TSCC what the board's position is, not what one's own personal position is. That's the time that you'll do that at your own meetings. But at the TSCC meeting, you're there as a representative of the board. Citizens may appear and the TSCC may allow them to speak. They'll probably have a 1 or 2 minute deadline. It's not a colloquy with citizens if they come. With the board, it is a colloquy, but it's a play. It's with roles written out. You may get a follow-up question from one of the TSCC members to one of your written responses. And in that case, they have probably thought of it beforehand because they've read your responses beforehand. And if you get a follow-up question, I would urge that you not guess. And if it's about something factual regarding a programmatic measure, I would suggest that you defer to the program director or usually to your director, and he will say, oh, I think, you know, Bill can answer that question best. Or if it's regarding a budget item, I would recommend that you defer to Jim, who will say, Lori could answer that question. But for the most part, it's very regimented and preordained. We will have already provided the answers to the TSCC because they will have already provided the questions to us. And really the hearing is so that that gets all on the record, what's already been back and forth with the question and the answer. Let me see if there's any other notes that I've made. I don't think so. If anyone has any questions, happy to answer.
Thank you, Allison. Go ahead, Jim.
Quick follow-ups. When staff receives the questions from the TSCC, we'll instantly start working on responses. We have a meeting set with your chair and vice chairs to walk through those questions and let them decide who they want to answer them. So that's staff's approach to allowing the board to determine who the best folks are. Second, the other piece that I want to flag for you guys is that you're going to be representing the board as a board member. Even if you're an elected official, you're an appointed official for purposes of your role. And we'll be discussing a bond that's on the ballot, which means you're subject to Oregon election law, which is one more reason why we want you to work from the scripted responses so that we don't end up with you having a violation of elections law inadvertently and being accountable for that as an individual. So that's just one more point I wanted to share to ensure that we support you guys effectively in this meeting. Thanks.
Any questions, Eric?
Yeah, Jim, I guess that gets to the question I was gonna ask, is that we have two hearings with TSCC, one on the budget, one on the bond.
Right.
As a board, we're going to them wanting their approval essentially, because we're going representing the organization. It's appropriate that we're advocating for our budget, but as you just pointed out, we can't advocate for the bond. Is that correct?
That's correct. Just the facts.
Yeah, that's partly why, especially on the bond measure, we'll want to stick very closely to the script. And, you know, we're not trying to get the TSCC to members to vote on the bond, to vote yes on the bond measure. We're asking that they approve our methodology and our dollar amounts. And so there shouldn't be any advocacy in our, and we'll make sure there isn't in our written responses. And that's another reason not to answer off the cuff on the bond measure issues.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Over Bill, CIP process.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, you threw me there. I thought Bill had a question. No. Bill, you're up. Capital Improvement Plan presentation.
Excellent. Bill Owen, Director of Engineering Operations. Thanks for having me this afternoon. I'll be talking about the long-term capital improvement plan that is included in your packets for today's meeting. And I know we're about 15 minutes behind, so I will do what I can to go through this presentation quickly, since hopefully you all had a chance to glance through the CIP previously. Note, there's no board action today on the CIP. This is for information purposes only. And at our next meeting on May 1st is when y'all will do your final consideration and consideration for vote. So, great, Wendy has this first slide set up. So the CIP, the next slide, please. So the CIP is provided to give you an outlook of the next 5 years of capital investments that we're anticipating and a glimpse of what is occurring in years 6 through 10 as well. So there's a 10-year outlook as well. So in this presentation, I'm going to be going over very, very briefly the CIP development process that we talked about in your last meeting. I want to make sure I emphasize about just briefly about the accuracy of the cost estimates because they differ. I'll go back through and do a quick recap of year one. It's basically a mirror of what Lori already provided. And then most of the presentation will focus on the 5-year CIP. So as we spoke about last meeting, there's multiple steps internally that the district staff walks through in order to develop this plan. And there, I think that you find these are fairly straightforward. First, we identify potential projects. This is not just something that I have in my head, but it's something that's been vetted and through some sort of analysis, hopefully through a master planning effort or something akin to that. We then take those projects and score them based upon a set of CIP criteria. We're using the same CIP criteria as legacy districts have used. In subsequent years, we will be revising those criteria to accommodate for all the purposes for that's under ORS 550. Afterwards, we've adjust those scores based on some added value benefits that each project has. I went through that last week, or last meeting, excuse me, and then I and others adjust those scores accordingly. And finally, it would come up with the schedule and budgets that you see in this packet. I think I talked about this briefly last time as well, but you know, not all projects come through the same. They're depending on the maturity of the project. You could have projects at the very beginning of construction. You receive the bid from the contractor, say it's going to cost $1 million to do this. And so our confidence in that number is pretty good. So we would be you'd see a plus or minus 5-15% change of, or maybe even less depending on the projects for that within that budget for that year. Other projects are just come out of a planning process and they could have significant changes in budgets. And so for some of you who are on your own boards probably have seen that through your own process. And so in those cases, we designate it as a class 5 project. That gives you and others who happen to be reading the project, the CIP, some indication that of the confidence level of our cost estimates depending on the project. Slide, please. So this is just very brief, no reason to see the numbers here, but on page 27 of your reports is the start of the CIP schedule. Next slide, please. And there's 3 pages worth of this detailed information. Year 1 goes through, looks like 8 or 9 different projects. Actually, there's more than that. There's additional facility improvements. These mirror those that Lori talked about. The total is 12.6 million. That's a little bit different than what's shown in the annual budget, but the reason is that this number includes district labor. And so when you subtract out district labor, the 12.170400 is the same as what's in Lori's budget. So they match up. We've talked about these other projects through Lori's presentation, so I don't want to dwell on this particular slide. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit more about the 5-year CIP and what that includes. You can see the majority of the project expense deals with what I'm calling major construction projects. Primarily, this is the bond related projects. So we've had presentations about this particular slice of the pie, but you can tell from the overall CIP, this is a very healthy percent of the total. In addition, the rest of the categories are divided by asset class. So we have drainage assets with a conveyance system. The pump stations are in here. Then the levy assets are in the purple there, and almost $2 million worth over a 5-year period. And then finally on operations assets, these are facilities and other types of assets in that category. Next slide, please. So let me walk through each one of these categories so you get a sense on what's going to be happening in the next 5-year period from what staff anticipate. Major construction, again, this is the referred bond. And so these are the projects within the bond that we are anticipating would start or continue in that first 5-year window. I'm not talking about the remaining years 6 through 10. That's the remaining parts of the bond funded projects. But this is the 5-year window. So GLMLS and FEMA projects are dominating the costs. You can't tell that from here, but they are. And then we have some pump station projects, and then we begin the floodplain restoration resilience projects relatively quickly, though we're going to wait for a couple of years. So the watershed plan comes to some conclusions on the best way to spend money effectively to not only to provide flood safety, but in a manner that promotes green infrastructure and these purposes. Next slide. Moving on to the levy assets, this is the $2 million purple slice. We have a couple of projects. The FEMA and PMLS design projects are also listed in here, and that's a nuance that Lori can address maybe a different question or afterwards if you'd like. But we have different funding sources, and so this is the indication of non-bond funding sources that these two projects still have. And so there's a small slice here for that. We have some interest in automating the slide gates at the 142nd Cross levee. This is a redundancy feature within MCDD. So if the area near Fairview Lake for some reason gets inundated, we can protect the airports and others on this side, and vice versa. Right now, in order to exercise those gates, our staff goes out for a couple hours. Imagine just putting a drill onto the gates and let the stem start moving up in order to actually lift the gate that helps protect the system there. So it'd be nice to be able to automate that as opposed to just coming out there with your Black & Decker drill or some other types of drill you might have. So next slide, please. Drainage assets. This involves, as I said, related to pipes and pump stations and channels. Trash rakes are things that we're still interested in adding to a couple of pump stations. Broadmoor and Schmier are some of the smaller ones. Broadmoor's an MCDD currently, and Schmier's in Penn 2. The McBride Slough drainage pipe is one that our district, the city, and the port have been talking about for some time. We have an application in to FEMA to fund a majority of that work, and so we're now in the stage of making sure we have enough resources to support hopefully the subsequent phases of that successful application. There's some other projects on this list, including those referenced back to a couple of slides earlier about year one projects. Including some pump station work, as well as some interested, the fourth bullet down, I guess I'll highlight this, deals with some of the PIR pump station forebay enhancements. This is work we want to do basically it's a pond on City of Portland property, but that serves as the forebay or the entrance into the pump station. And there's some wetland enhancements I think not only would help our permitting efforts for the PIR pump station work, but it goes beyond that and provides some enhancements to the wetlands in that vicinity. So this is a good initial project to help us understand what's going to be a good balance between how much money we put in for sort of traditional infrastructure like this versus those environmental enhancements that the new urban district wants us to contribute to. And if you don't mind, I'll ask for questions at the end. I just have 2 more slides here. Go ahead. Operations. We have a need over the next 5 years. Eventually, our pickups are going to be worn out, and so we want to have a chance to make sure we have money in there to replace those. We have a larger SUV that we really don't use very much, and we're thinking about replacing that with an electric vehicle. So starting the process towards something that has a lighter carbon footprint. And we have a series of equipment needs. Our excavator is pretty old. The tractors we use a lot, and we expect that those will be need to be replaced probably in about 2-3 years from now. And a couple of the smaller things we see here. Next slide, please. In Appendix B, as in boy, there's a series of individual one-page summaries of each of the projects listed in the 5-year CIP. It starts on page 30 of your packet. This does not include any projects that start after year 5, just by choice, I guess. And so as you're interested, you're welcome to go into those individual summaries and learn a little bit more about what they entail. There's a little photo in there most times, and see what a wood chipper looks like. All right, and the last slide. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, I'm open to questions. There was a question that came up in the prior week on page, looks like page 25 of your packet. There's a brief narrative of the difference in this year's CIP versus those of the previous year. And so it's a substantial difference, primarily because of the bond. But there are, and I identify a couple of items that have that drive that change. One, of course, is the PMLS projects, and the other is the FEMA projects. Those are the two big ones. The reason for that is the 5-year CIP estimate is a rolling estimate. So last year it covers the subsequent 5-year periods. Now we're 1 year later. And just so happens that that 1 year is a big deal when it comes to the timing of construction. And so many of you know that's where the big money is for capital projects. 80% plus of capital projects are in construction. So that drives a lot of this change. I will say too that the FEMA accreditation projects also are increased because our better understanding of permitting requirements and construction, particularly on the riverward side of the levee. This is the area next to the Columbia River or the Columbia Slough. There are many permit requirements there, and we knew about them but didn't fully appreciate the impact of the budget. So there are other factors there we've incorporated, not only in this, but we incorporated into the bond proposed bond measure, and those two numbers sync up. So there are a couple of reasons for this bump, and others are stated in the CIP. So I know that was a question that came up earlier this week. I want to make sure everybody on the board heard about that, and open to other questions. Smolander, you had a thought?
Just a question on, what do you consider the budget to be for a project? You know, in the earliest stages, when it's in the master plan, is, you know, plus or minus a couple $1 million. Get to 30% of engineering design. Is that when you sort of say this budget for this project is 13.8 million, and then measure financial changes from that, from the 13.8? Because on 13th Street, the budget seems to just sort of change every year.
Yeah, so the budget does seem to change. Particularly that one was a frustrating one for staff. So in the section of the CIP when we talk about accuracy of cost estimates, we have ranges of how much that we feel the accuracy of that one number, which is a little bit crazy to provide one number. This is what the ranges could be. And by the time you get to 30%, most of the field information has been collected. And so that number should be a little bit tighter. So, but on the case for the 13th Avenue projects, that number, so the project number budget went up dramatically after 30%. But unfortunately, by the time we got to construction, we were not successful in estimating what the contracting community in the marketplace thought that it it would cost to pay for it. So whatever information we had out there just to guesstimate what the contractor will respond back, we were just off. And so
But it's fine if you're off,
Yeah.
right? It's what you learn from that.
Yep.
And that's
Yeah.
where, when we look at these numbers, the dialogue with your board should be, we did a great job on this, we value engineered this out, but we had unforeseen changes because we couldn't get water construction time. And it let it out another 2 years and I got another 10% hit on that. Again, is how do we support you effectively by having the right number in there? And I just want your thoughts on that over time.
Let me give you some thoughts. What I'm trying to do in the last couple of years for those who are on the district boards, you've heard me say that the numbers, I'm putting some numbers in initially for the projects, but what I'm really focused on is the first 30%. And then that's going to be the first gate that I want to come back and say, look, I said it was going to be $1 million. That's what the planning process said. It's 4 million. And say, do we want to do this right now? Or do we want to do something different? How do we want? And I would come out with a couple of suggestions of how we can move forward. But that would be a stepping stone to say, look, this may not be the right time, or it could be, and here's how we could finance it.
Sounds like we're on the right path with that, because I always get concerned of what is it that we've authorized for this project, and then just track changes from it. I mean, because there will be. Okay, thank you very much for that.
Sure.
Bob?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. My question is, you mentioned that the evaluation criteria do not include the new mandates yet, and that we'll get to that eventually down the road. Really two questions to that. One, really, we're spending a lot of money now, and so shouldn't those already be in there? And two, what are the implications in terms of actual allocations of funding for not having them in there for another couple of years as we start to spend down these resources?
Yeah, I'll take first stab at it and others can join in. You're correct that we don't have it in there right now. There are several staff, including myself, that are keenly aware of those features to it. And we already are including those aspects into the RFP scopes and the design scopes for those projects. The PIR pump station is one example of that. We're trying to expand the scope so that it's not just dealing with environmental permitting, which is kind of the minimum amount of work you need to do, but going beyond that and looking at what can we do to help improve the channel and the wetlands in the area. So it's not necessarily in the CIP yet, criteria yet. So we're doing it kind of on the side for the first 2 years. The levee projects, the FEMA levee projects are also a good example of that. It's not going to be influential necessarily in the CIP next year or the year after, but it would have to be incorporated in other ways. Either of you all want to add to that?
Thank you, Mike. I think the other thing I would say is that we built some budget into the individual projects to fund those aspects. So Bob, I hear what you're saying, and I do think those criteria are going to be very powerful and will lead to long-term change in how we select projects. We're going to be bringing all these projects to you individually and as a CIP. So you should be able to see as we work on those criteria, how staff is attempting to incorporate the environmental, water quality, and other mandates into the work. We've had some initial discussions too about the best way to begin that conversation and to engage the board and which board needs to be engaged. And so you'll see some staff, probably informational presentations coming at you. And then we want to get into it for real beginning in January with the new board, probably in preparation for the budget that they will adopt about a year from now. Colin or?
And I just want to say, I don't want to undersell what the current capital, the CIP committee currently does. So we do include equity, environmental uplift, as well as sort of focusing or elevating multi-benefit projects. We just know that there's a lot more work to be done. There's information that's going to come out of the watershed improvement plan, but there's ways to go through these valuation criteria across the whole organization that are going to have better project delivery throughout. So doing something now, and I think we're set up for a lot more success in the future.
So Eric and then Nancy and Mary Helen.
My question was just how, Colin just touched on it, but I was curious, how is it the watershed improvement plan would help inform, some of what Bob has raised? I don't know the pieces to understand that.
Yeah, my expectation is that the watershed improvement plan recommends a series of projects that could be incorporated into the CIP. So similar to what I do to look at master plans now or levy assessment engineering plan, I would look to the watershed plan as well to funnel projects into our consideration to rank. Does that answer your question?
I'm not knowledgeable about what it is, so I just was trying to understand how it fits.
It's really going to help us identify those floodplain restoration projects that will help improve habitat quality and water quality while also providing flood safety benefits. Right? Which parcels are available, which ones connect with our drainage system effectively, which ones provide the habitat value. We've got to coordinate that with all of our local partners, DEQ and so on. So it's actually really exciting. I think we're going to do some really interesting work, but we do need to do that work.
Nancy?
Thanks. Now you can hear me. Okay, so I would say I think Eric's question and Bob's observations are spot on. Like, and the watershed plan itself, yeah, it'll funnel projects into the CIP. I think it would also be able to make recommendations on operations and not only CIP projects, right? But the watershed plan is not necessarily going to provide your criteria for the CIP. Like, you can do that now. So it sounds like you're already, like, as you're saying, you're already incorporating thoughts about the new mandates into the work that you're doing. This is what you told us you would be doing. So I very much appreciate that. I think making sure that you document it in preparation for so I understand you're going to have those criteria for the next board when you do your next CIP go around. I think that's great, but you're already doing some of that work. So being sure to document it as you go along so that you have something you can, sort of recognize that foundation, and also bring the new board up to speed on what it actually means at this point. Like, hi, new board, this is what we've done so far in incorporating the mandates, and you're going to help us do that more. I think all those pieces go together. I'm encouraged that you're already thinking along those lines, but I definitely think you should document it. And I'm encouraged that you have a timeline for incorporating that into CIP review. And I would say, like, don't slow down on any of that. So I'll say about that.
Nancy, before we go to Mary Helen, I just want to point out we're 20 minutes behind schedule. We have some ordinances we need to get to on the vote. So before I see 4 more hands pop up after Mary Helen asked her question, this is an important discussion, but we've got we're gonna see this again. We're not voting on this today, so also use this as an opportunity to go back and think about your questions, send them in to staff, and we'll get them answered. Go ahead, Mary Helen.
Since you said that we're going to discuss this again, let me just put these points out there. The area at the slough by the PIR pump station includes property that's adjacent that was Vanport Place marking historic foundations. And so if you could include staff, we have on our staff is a person that's now working for the Friends of Trees and is identifying historic trees and how the construction of the slough, he previously worked for the Columbia Sioux Watershed Council, and how that historic area was. We're working with national organizations about grants to do that restoration. So Bob, maybe we want to have a conversation about your vision too, because As you know, I don't know, some people know, but that whole area, the slough was a shipping channel and large ships used to come up that during Vanport days, World War II days. So if we could be included in that conversation, I think we could lend a lot of research that has already been done about the historic nature of it and how to bring it up and clean it up and what's being done there. The other part of that is the disturbance of that area because of the archaeological nature that will be listed on the National Register as a historic site. Whole nother story, but that has to be under consideration. The other thing I wanted to mention, and maybe Jim and Colin can speak to this, but because they're on the, well, Jim's the director and Colin's on a committee for the National, I get it wrong, but NAFSA, NAFSMA, National Association of Flood Safety. Sunny Simpkins, a former director, or not director, but she was a community engagement director, operations manager for MCDD, is now the executive director, and they've come out with a national plan and guidance of how to do flood safety programs and inform the public. And I think it would be helpful to have that incorporated as well as the city one.
Thank you, Mary Helen. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move on because of time here. Appreciate it. Again, we have another opportunity. Send your questions in to staff. We'll get more comprehensive answers. Colin, you're up for DEI contract.
All right, thank you so much, Colin Rowan, Director of Planning and Public Affairs, and in the interest of time, I'll try to accelerate some of this, but do want to provide a little bit of background. But today would like the board to consider contract approval on a diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting services contract. There were some details, I think it's page 73 in your packet. So just, next slide, please. Just a little bit of agenda setting on this is that the need for this work is really both sort of bureaucratic administrative policymaking as well as a real opportunity for staff and for the public, the board and others to really set a strategic vision. So from the sort of more bureaucratic take on this, the need is set in ORS 550 to embed equity, promote equity and social justice in all aspects of the district's operations. So this work does support that legislative mandate. Your board has worked on a number of items, including adopting a mission, vision, values, an equity policy, and most recently an equity framework that has all been based on board discussion and direction. And so this document really provides an approach, and in a couple slides I have sort of where we are in that process that framework establishes. So the next part of that is equity action planning. Go to the next slide, please. So beyond that need, there really is a large opportunity. And so that opportunity really is unlocked by engaging in this work. And that's both inside and outside the organization. That's staff engaging in it, board engaging, and stakeholders in the public engaging. So first and foremost, this allows us to come up with realistic, implementable plans that improve the service that we provide, especially to underserved communities, and really ensuring our entire community benefits from the work that we do. It also builds our organization and is a really important foundation and platform to build out the strategic goals that we need as we make this transition. And so this cuts across all of our departments, all of the work that we do at the Flood Safety District. And promoting that through equity and environmental justice is sound practice because if we're looking at the most vulnerable populations and how our work impacts them, we know that we're making tangible change for all communities. And then really part of that is working towards this shared vision. And so equity action plans and equity action planning really will promote these things that we've identified in the framework to provide all people a healthy and climate resilient environment, equitable opportunities to prepare, respond, and recover from floods. I think that's a really important piece that the most vulnerable communities, flooding impacts them very differently than more affluent communities, people that are able to get a hotel room or to rebuild really easily. And so looking to those most vulnerable communities should be a focus. And so to do that, we have set this framework. Wendy, if you go to the next slide, show you where we are in this framework or in this effort. And so we adopted the equity framework that was in 2022. Now we're moving into this blue box, which is the equity action plan. So the major deliverables are to create the equity action plans, and it is plural. Those should be specific plans for our different departments and divisions to really focus on how that affects their work and how they'll be able to evaluate and set benchmarks, identify their own goals, as well as larger strategic goals at the organizational level. And then to create an equity lens framework, this is something that would be embedded in things like our CIP planning, all of our planning efforts, just to ask a set of questions about how this work or what we're prioritizing the work affects all communities. So to do this, we're proposing this DEI consulting service and a contract where this consultant will assess our current policies and readiness, make suggestions on how to update those policies and working with the board, support our development of goals, objectives, and strategies, and then really create actual implementable action plans, not things that sit on the shelf, not things that are just set on them, to the side and are only, kind of one-offs, but really are embedded into all of these different planning tools that we have within our organization. So the staff's recommendation, go to the next slide. The staff's recommendation is to award a contract to Espousal Strategies. The total amount of that contract is for a maximum contract value of $250,000. Want to emphasize a couple things about that. We are really looking at focusing. It'll probably be a 5-year contract, but looking at getting most of the work done in year 1 and year 2. In your FY25 budget that you have in front of you, there's the F1 proposed budget for that, which is about $80,000. We expect something similar for year 2. The board as well as staff will have the ability to really direct that work. It provides us with some additional headroom, but there's no obligation to spend that full contract amount. And we'll be getting going with that contractor in beginning of the fiscal year and assume that both years to get the actual action plans together. We'll spend about $160,000 to $200,000. We have a project manager identified, Esther Moulton. They'll be leading this from the staff side. We also have a DEI work group within our organization, but the goal is to really engage all parts of the organization, all staff and all board members and others. So with that, I will take any questions. Sure.
I just wanted to confirm, looking at in the packet, it makes reference to that you did a standard RFP process and you followed all the ordinary procurement rules. So this is just a final step because of the contract value. If it wasn't, you'd already be on your way. So that procurement has already been accomplished appropriately, is I guess what I'm getting at.
That is correct.
Bob.
Yeah, thanks. I guess 2 questions. One, I'm curious about your discussions with them as far as how much they really tailor the program to the organization. Do they really come in and take a look at what the mission is and the vision and the goals and kind of integrate it into that? Or is it more of a generic program? Because I've seen the latter a few times now where it feels kind of like, I think it's important that these programs really integrate into what the purpose of the organization is and think about that a little bit. So that's my first question. And the second one is have you talked to groups, in terms of references about that have gone through their entire process and how effective it was, both opportunities and challenges in terms of the outcomes and where they actually got these other programs to, maybe some similarly situated organizations.
So, Bob, for the first question, they provided in their written proposal as well as in the interview a really tailored and specific plan that largely looked at the work that we've done before, and the espousal strategies really did dig deep into the work that you and your board have engaged in over the last few years. And so their proposal really showed a close attention to detail and something that was specific to this somewhat unique, that we're a state special district, that we have a changing geography, a changing set of stakeholders, a changing mission. So it was responsive to that. As far as any of the follow-up, I would have to get back to you to see what any additional follow-up that our procurement team did, but I did not have any reference checks, even as a member of the evaluation team, but I can definitely follow up with you.
Eric, quick question for you. What are the biggest gaps that we need to fill in this contract?
So I think there's a few gaps that we really have. Right now, focus inward is really looking at our recruitment, our contracting, especially as we take a look into the future, and if the voters do approve a bond program, how we go about really recruiting a diverse set of contractors to work on that effort. Internally for staff, it really is recruiting a workforce that represents what the community looks like. So there is a lot of work to be done on that. And then from a stakeholders perspective, we have been able to tap into some other work that's been done around vulnerable populations, environmental justice communities, but our own understanding remains limited in ways that our work can most benefit the most vulnerable communities. So that's the more outward facing. A lot of that will be through connections with community-based organizations and other stakeholders that have done a lot of work in that space. And I think there's a lot more room to learn from what others are doing versus just creating something new or a new program, but basically to bolster some of that effort.
A couple of other things that have come up recently, again, just back to procurement, making sure that there's a broad awareness of the work that we do, and potentially working with larger vendors to ensure that they bring on subs and so on to grow the capacity and expertise in diverse businesses, small businesses. We have training to do with our staff and board to ensure that we're thoughtful in addressing communities that we maybe don't know as well as others. Mary Helen has very thoughtfully and consistently, and I'm grateful for her bringing it up, brought up issues of limited English proficiency and how do we identify which communities we really need to serve and what's the best ways to do that. Sometimes translation is it, sometimes it's other things. So that whole community engagement side is very important. Recruiting board members that look like the community is also a gap that we think we can fill. So those are just a few things. And again, we welcome engagement from the board on how they want to participate and help us make sure we're serving everyone in the district.
Got your note, Mary Helen, about not being able to hear what people are saying. So just everyone speak up. Go ahead,
Mary Helen.
Go ahead, Mary Helen.
Okay, well, I didn't hear the first part of what Jim said, so I might ask or say something that he already said. The director, the executive director of espousal strategies is John L. Bell, who is a former urban flood safety water quality board member. He has a stellar reputation with various agencies, worked in mayor's office, those sorts of things. They also are known to have sort of what Bob alluded to, like a general framework of this is how you do it. And so I like Bob's suggestion that, we want to make sure it's tailored. And then to, Eric's point about gaps, yes, there's additional work that needs to be done, and I've been a long time proponent of equity and how to do simple things, and rely on existing policies. So I would encourage what Colin just said about follow up on people that they've worked with and their responses to the programs, because the city, the county, the state, Metro, everybody has, equity strategies for operational needs, and we might be able to use parts of those. But as far as gaps, we meet everything that's required in ORS 550. And I realize that I've said this before, but, it says promote and provide. And, if we meet those things now and the additional funding, for this project is to supplement additional work, I would feel like it would be more important for the permanent board to be able to make those decisions, because if, we have already done what the code says we need to have done, and this would be extra at that point. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mary Helen. Eric.
Mr. Chair, I would move to approve and authorize the executive director or their designee to negotiate and sign a contract for diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting services with a maximum contract value of $250,000 with Espousal Strategies LLC for a term of 2 years. The motion on page 73.
Thank you, Eric. We have a motion from Eric.
I'll second.
We have a second from Nancy. Discussion on the motion. I'll just say real quickly, I'm going to support this, mainly because of what Colin presented as far as they don't have to spend the full $250,000. They spend what they see as going to be as beneficial. Bob hit on the very two things that were in my head. Exactly. He's exactly reiterated, because we're struggling with the same thing. But because of that, I'll be supportive. Any other discussion on the motion?
I just want to say the same thing about, Mary Helen raises a good point that I believe we're currently in compliance. I think we need to do this. Espousal Strategy is a great choice, I think, without knowing, not even having seen their proposal. I know them, I know their reputation. If we can keep that down, it's a lot of money. If we can save on that budget, I would be very pleased.
Thank you, Corky. Any other discussion? Not seeing any. Do we do a voice vote on this one? All right. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. On to the next. We
Wait
are.
1 second. Can I say I abstain?
Oh, did you abstain on that, Mary Helen?
Yes,
Okay.
I would like to.
You did, if you didn't say aye, so we will note that. Thank you. I should ask that after our voice votes, because it's hard to tell with folks online and in the room. All right, Bill, it's back to you.
Excellent. So I have a topic related to the development review program. There are 2 parts to this element. First is the second reading of the ordinance that you all had looked at during your April 3rd meeting. So this is your second reading of this ordinance. And the information is in your packet starting on page 74. There are two motions that we're recommending as staff. Here first is to read the ordinance by title only, and then following up with a motion to adopt. So if you have any questions for me?
First, since you have 2 things here, right? You have the ordinance and the resolution. Is that what you just described as the 2?
Let's focus on the ordinance first,
Okay.
yeah, and then we'll go to the resolution in a second.
Eric.
So, Mr. Chair, I move to hold the second reading of ordinance 2024-01 by title only.
Thank you, Eric. We have a motion by Eric Mueller. Do I have a second? Second from Emerald Vogue. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in, I've been told on this ordinance, we need to do a roll call vote.
This is just on this reading by title only.
Okay, so voice vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Anybody abstain? No. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Bill. On to the resolution.
Bill, do you mind reading the title?
Oh, yeah, we'll do that.
Have it up right now.
Sure. Yeah, so the title is an ordinance creating a development review service charge structure and methodology and authorizing service charges to be set by resolution. So the next step would be offering a motion to adopt that ordinance. Eric?
Mr. Chair, I move to adopt Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District Ordinance 2024-01, defining the development review service charge structure and methodology and authorizing service charges to be set by resolution.
Thank you, Eric. We have a motion by Eric Mueller,
Second.
second by Emerald Bogue. Any discussion?
Question which you may have already answered, so my apologies, but this is the current. So why are we voting on this?
Transfer it to the new district.
Okay, I thought I read that we didn't need to vote to transfer it, so that's why I was confused.
Yeah, you need to have a development methodology, so to be able to charge for development.
Okay.
As an ordinance.
Oh, I guess I reread it. Staff recommends that no changes are required.
Right.
My mistake. I knew I was missing something.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good question.
Any other discussion, questions?
We are really not trying to make you vote on things you don't need to vote.
Well, I
on.
assume that. That's why I was puzzled more than anything, so.
So for this purpose, Wendy, you need a roll call vote?
I'd like to do that.
Okay, let's do it.
Nancy Hendrickson,
Aye.
Steve Fancher,
Aye.
Eric Mueller,
Aye.
Dave Rittman,
Yes.
Ashton Simpson. No longer with us. Lori Stegman,
Aye.
Emerald Bogue. Aye. Corky Collier,
Aye.
Rochelle Altman,
Aye.
Mary Helen Kincaid,
Yes.
Kenny Stephenson,
Aye.
Eric Molander,
Aye.
Bob Salinger,
Aye.
Heather King.
Aye.
With 13 ayes, the motion carries.
All right, motion passes. Thank you very much. On to the next.
Back to the resolution now.
Back to the resolution.
Yeah, so sorry, this is a multi-step process here. So now we get one further into the weeds. In this case, there's a resolution we're offering to set the development review standards and service charges. I believe this was discussed in your last meeting. So the motion and details start on page 81 of your packet.
Thank you, Bill. Emerald.
I move that the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District Resolution 2024-04-01 be approved to set the district's development review standards and service charges.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Emerald, a second by Tanny Stephenson. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, let's do the roll call vote.
Nancy Hendrickson,
Aye.
Steve Fancher,
Aye.
Eric Mueller,
Aye.
Dave Rittman,
Yes.
Ashton Simpson, Lori Stegman,
Aye.
Emerald Bogue.
Aye.
Corky Collier.
Aye.
Rochelle Altman,
Aye.
Mary Helen Kincaid,
Yes.
Kenny Stephenson,
Aye.
Eric Molander,
Aye.
Bob Salinger,
Aye.
Heather King.
Aye.
13 ayes.
All right, the motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Bill. All right, moving on to the Intergovernmental Fee Ordinance, which is on page 89 of your board packet, the memo from Lori. And Lori, did you want to kick that off?
Sure, I'll be brief. This is the flood safety benefit fee that's charged intergovernmental fee to each of our jurisdictional partners. We went through the information. That's the $6.262 million that's in the budget that is allocated by population. All of those specifics about how the allocation is calculated, the increase in the fee on an annual basis, all of the things that we talked about as we worked through this process, those are all included in the ordinance. So there's a two-step process again here, where for the second reading of the ordinance, we're asking the board to authorize reading the ordinance by title only. So that will be the first vote that we need to do. And then we're asking for your approval of the ordinance, and that will be the second vote.
Okay, so the first one is pretty straightforward here. Eric?
I move to hold the second reading of ordinance 2024-02 by title only.
We have a motion by Eric Mueller. Do I have a second?
Yep, I'll second.
Second by Nancy Hendrickson. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
An ordinance enacting an intergovernmental fee under SB 1517 is the title of the ordinance.
Thank you,
So
Jim.
it's been read.
Now we need a motion to adopt.
Eric.
So
I move to adopt. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go. Move us along, yes.
I move to adopt the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District Ordinance 2024-02, defining the flood safety intergovernmental fee. Eric?
Second.
We have a motion by Eric, a second by Emerald. Any discussion? Questions? It's a big moment, folks. Let's do a roll call vote.
Nancy Hendrickson,
aye.
Steve Fancher,
Aye.
Eric Mueller,
Aye.
Dave Ritma,
Yes.
Lori Stegman,
Aye.
Emerald Bogue,
Aye.
Cork Collier,
Aye.
Rochelle Altman,
Aye.
Mary Helen Kincaid,
Yes.
Kenny Stephenson,
Aye.
Eric Molander,
Aye.
Bob Salinger,
Aye.
Heather King,
Aye.
13 again.
Like the Academy Awards, there's way too many people to thank, but thank you everyone for helping.
I got a little bit of goosebumps there for a minute, because I think what we just did represented this massive collaboration and very, very difficult work.
It was the biggest hurdle. Honestly. There's still one more though that you guys got to do by 3:30. So, or not, if you choose not to.
Okay, thank you, Lori.
You're welcome. Do you want me to jump into the slides?
You are back up. This is starting on page 93 of your board packet. Yes, please.
Okay, I am going to try to talk fast. I apologize about the timing. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, so today we're having the second reading of the ordinance defining the assessment allocation methodology for the urban district. If you recall the first reading, we reviewed some of the options the board has in relation to assessments. Today we'll be reviewing results of the recent analysis of assessments using the proposed budget for the district for 24-25. Senate Bill 1517, which held legislative updates for the urban district, has been signed by the governor. The legislation includes criteria related to the transfer of assessment authority from the legacy districts to the urban district. First, the urban district needs to select an existing assessment allocation methodology. This approach allows for the transfer of assessments without needing a vote of the people to continue assessments already in place on the floodplain. The existing methodology can be adopted by ordinance. There are three existing assessment methodologies, the one currently used by SDIC and MCDD, Pen 1, and Pen 2. At our last meeting, we reviewed the pros and cons of each of those methods. The SDIC MCDD methodology is the method that the board has been considering for use by the urban district. All analysis provided to the board to date has used this method, and the updated information we will review today also uses the SDIC MCDD methodology. It covers the vast majority of district properties. Although the calculation is complex, it utilizes factors that are regularly tracked, can be substantiated, and are readily available each year. As we discussed in our last meeting, if the board chooses to use the Penn 1 method instead, there's an additional shift of assessments from MCDD properties to the SDIC properties. This is because the Penn 1 methodology does not utilize impervious surface as one of the allocation factors. Let's review some key takeaways when looking at the assessment allocations. First, assessments for non-exempt property taxpayers are typically a small part of the overall property tax bill. On average, they're less than 3% of the total bill received by the property owner paying property taxes. That doesn't minimize the fact that these are dollars for these individuals, but it is a small part of their property tax bill. Second, there have been fluctuations in assessments allocated to the properties annually due to those changes in project work that impact the cost factors. We'll look at the historical data in a few minutes. Property owners are familiar with these variations, and we normally only get a few calls from property owners each year as they receive their tax bills. We believe this is due to the fact that the assessments are a small part of the tax bill overall for most payers. Last, you'll see similar fluctuations in the estimated assessments for 24-25 in the urban district. Let's review the process for assigning a rate increase to assessments. As we've discussed, a rate increase is not applied by property. Instead, we start with the total assessments and then use the assessment allocation method to calculate the year's assessment amount by property. This schedule shows the calculation of the rate increase of 10% for the urban district. We start with the 23-24 total assessments for the legacy districts. These add up to $10 million. Then we apply the 10% increase, coming to a total of $11 million to allocate across the properties in the floodplain. Remembering, of course, that that dollar amount isn't the dollar amount in revenue we get, but this is the starting point that then goes through the allocation process and gets impacted by compression. The next step in our process is to take that total $11 million in assessments and allocate them to each property in the floodplain. The assessment method uses cost factors to perform that calculation. Costs in the budget are evaluated annually to determine which costs are flood control, stormwater average, and stormwater peak. Because projects change each year, assessment allocations change to align with that year's projects. The annual rate increase historically has resulted in a range of rate changes to landowners depending on those changing cost factors. Each year, properties in the floodplain experience assessment amount changes because of three factors. First, the boards have approved rate changes, which are applied at the total assessment level, as we've seen. Your board packet includes a summary of the assessment changes that have occurred each year by legacy district. Next, property changes can impact the allocation. Changes in impervious surface area is normally the change we see that causes this impact. Finally, as we've discussed, the changes in cost drivers also impact that allocation. So let's take a look at how these changes have looked historically. The chart shows us a scatter diagram of changes in assessment by property for the last 3 years. As you can see, assessment rate changes have ranged between 0 and 10%. The chart is showing us that regardless of the rate increase, changes in assessments allocated by property have had a range with many reductions and increases between 0 and around 30%, with outliers of as much as 130%. When I saw this data, I really wanted to drill down into that cluster of assessments that are between a penny and $500. These levels of assessment reflect a normal homeowner on the floodplain, so let's take a look at those properties. This is a scatter chart for those properties with assessments between a penny and $500. As you can see, these properties show the same trend in assessment change between negative 20% or a reduction in assessment and a 30% increase. These changes are regardless of the rate increase imposed for the year. You can also see that most of these properties have had an assessment of less than $300. Remember that for these properties, the assessment is normally less than 3% of the total property tax bill. Now, this is my warning. We're moving forward to the assessments for 24-25, and there are several factors that impact the calculation of those assessments. What this slide is telling you is that we can estimate assessments for the upcoming year, but these calculations will only be a reasonable estimate of what the tax bill will end up looking like. There's no way for us to know what a property tax bill will look like until the county runs their calculations for each jurisdiction. This scatter chart shows the estimated change in assessments from the current year legacy district assessments to the upcoming year for the urban district using a 10% rate increase and using the proposed budget to calculate cost factors. This chart is, I know it looks like just a big mush of dots, but it's very similar to the changes that we see in the historical chart for the legacy districts, with many properties seeing a reduction in assessment and the increase of most properties between being 35% or less. There are some outliers and there are some properties with 40 to 45% increases. Let's look at the residential properties, those with assessments at $500 or less. For residential properties, we're seeing similar variations in assessment, with more properties seeing a decrease and those seeing increases falling between 0 and 30%. So very similar to what we've seen historically. Finally, let's look at the chart for estimated overall change in property tax. And this is their total property tax bill. So this has all of the other jurisdictions' taxes included. As you can see, property tax bills are projected to change within about a 10% band, either declining or increasing within that 10% change band. We've got some outliers, but for homeowners, we're seeing an average change in property tax bill of less than 1%. Then I provided for you on this slide a list of relief programs that Multnomah County provides for taxpayers to support with property tax bills. And I think Eric Molander also brought up another program that exists. Since the assessment is included within the property tax bill, these programs are applicable to the district's floodplain residents as well. There are also programs for businesses and nonprofit organizations. So this is the end of my slides. I know this is an important topic, so I apologize for going so quickly through this information. We are asking the board to proceed with the second reading of the ordinance today and consider approval of this assessment methodology, and those proposed motions are included in your board packet. But I can take questions on this information if anybody has questions.
Thank you, Lori. Question? Eric.
Yes, so under Resolution 02055 of the Board of County Commissioners for Multnomah County, Peninsula Drainage District Number 2, they established a secondary levy benefits class. And these are homeowners that are on the riverine side of the levy. That was at a significant reduction because they didn't receive the same costs or benefits from people on the landward side of the levy. Under this proposal, will this class of homeowners be eliminated?
I'm not sure staff has dug deep into that 2001 report enough to know the answer to that question, Eric. But I'm happy to dig into it. I think it's a really fruitful line of inquiry. And as we discussed earlier, if it doesn't apply, we can talk with the board about ways to work with the county to see if we could renew it. Did you mention, again, I apologize for not having read that 2001 or 2002 ordinance that we shared with you from the county. Didn't it say it expired after a point or no?
No, it said that for under this resolution, what they did is they established a program that implemented a limited rate relief discount program for homeowners that are substantially based on the program set forth in Appendix D. And Appendix D says, if you're elderly and on a fixed income, we'll hold the rate at the prior level until you sell the property, and then it goes up.
I think unless it's included in the adopted MCDD methodology, it would not be included. That is my instinct.
Can anyone answer that?
I don't think it would, because that's the Penn 2 adopted methodology, and we're adopting the MCDD methodology. So unless the MCDD methodology included it, it would not be carried over. That would be my instinct. Again, I could be wrong, and we're happy to do that research.
I think that we need to, because this is going to come up at both the Bridgeton Neighborhood Association as well as, and we need to have that answer because somebody will raise it.
Yeah.
And the second element to it is, since the county has allowed this in the past, we may, as a board, want to consider it.
Yeah.
And so what's the process? Would we have to rebuild the ordinance, or would we amend the ordinance?
Just be an amended ordinance.
It would be amended ordinance?
That's what I was wondering.
I think the one thing, and again, Allison, you may not be prepared to weigh in on this. I think we want to be conscious that one of the reasons we had to pick an existing one is so that it's not a new tax. And if you move into the new tax realm, you're going to end up needing to go to a vote of the public. Maybe something you want to do down the road, but I just wanted to flag that for you. That's why we were moving through the process with the existing methodology.
I'd love to get a legal opinion on that, because my hope is that we say, well, it's not a new tax, we're using the MCD methodology, and amending it with methodology that is currently being used at Penn 2. So I think it passes the smell test, but it may not pass the legal test.
Emerald was next, but real quick, I think adopting an ordinance today wouldn't preclude us from considering an amended ordinance later.
Certainly not. There may be other requirements.
Go ahead, Emily.
I don't have a question. I have a motion, but if folks have further questions, I would recommend that we put this in our next meeting then, because we are well over time. So should I make this motion, or are we having, because if I
Staff
have
would
a
really
hard
appreciate
stop,
the board
others may have a hard stop
making a
too.
decision on this ordinance today, because it's so tied into.
Mary Helen, do you have a quick question?
My question was, can the ordinance be amended? And if it can be amended, if there's other suggestions to do that, do we have to do it one at a time or multiple ones? And with the assessments, has any of the large landowners been notified, provided any information in regard to the increases that MCDD projects?
No, because they haven't been approved, other than we've shared the budget and other information through the newsletter. So, and again, the estimates that we have now are estimates, and they'll be wrong depending on how the county information comes out.
Okay, so no information about increased taxes or fees have been changed?
I don't believe that's an accurate statement, Mary Helen. What we've said is we haven't done specific outreach to every business. We've
Okay,
done a lot
so
of
they
outreach
would
overall.
rely on the ballot measure to get the information or contact you, is that correct?
We also have our newsletter. We've published all these notices in the newspaper. We've published the forecast. So all these things have been out in the public domain for a long time, Mary Helen.
Okay, I'll relay that to them.
Okay.
I'm not seeing hands up.
I move to adopt Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District Ordinance 2024-03, defining the assessment methodology.
We have to do the reading
Oh,
of the title first, sorry.
And I can't hear what whoever said they were making a
Don't
motion.
worry, it's null and void. We're gonna start again, Mary Helen.
And before we get there, I just want to reiterate, this board does have authority to amend the ordinance. I think if the research was done around what it meant as far as, is it a new tax or not? If we amend it, then we can come back and have a discussion about the merits. I don't think trying to amend the ordinance here because we haven't had discussions a good thing to do, but I know we need to get business done.
Staff will commit to doing research on what is required to amend this ordinance.
If the board so desires.
Yes, I want to do a little scoping before I commit to a
Yeah.
timeline. I can commit to giving you an update no later than your next meeting.
Thanks, let's proceed.
So can I make the motion since maybe I'm easier to hear? I move to hold the second.
Wait, there needs to be a first reading. so
Second reading,
Let's
sorry.
go, let's go ahead.
She's got it, sorry.
I move to hold the second reading of ordinance 2024-03 by title only. Is that what we need?
That's the
Okay.
one.
We have a motion by Nancy. Do we have a second?
I second the motion.
We have a second by Rochelle. Any discussion? Hearing none. We need to do a.
Voice.
I think voice.
Voice is okay on this. Okay, voice vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, hearing none, motion carries unanimously.
This is an ordinance adopting and applying an assessment methodology under Senate Bill 1517 from 2024.
Yeah.
Okay. I move to adopt the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District Ordinance 2024-03 defining the assessment methodology.
Do we have a motion by
Second.
Nancy?
Second.
Oh, I heard somebody online.
That was me, it's Heather.
Heather
Heather
King.
King.
Okay, we have a motion by Nancy, a second by Heather King. Any discussion? Hearing none, let's do a roll call vote.
Heather King. Scaring me.
Aye.
Eric Molander,
Abstain.
Tammy Stephenson,
I'll abstain for now.
Mary Helen Kincaid,
I abstain.
Rochelle Altman,
Aye.
Corky Collier,
All right,
Emerald Bogue,
Aye.
Lori Stegman,
Aye.
Dave Ritma,
Yes.
Eric Mueller,
Aye.
Steve Fancher,
aye.
Nancy Hendrickson.
Aye.
We have 9 ayes and 3 abstentions. Motion carries.
Motion passed.
And staff will get to work straight away on that analysis. I appreciate, Eric, once again, you identifying a potential improvement that would allow some relief for low-income and other communities. Thank you for finding that for us.
Thank you all. I know we're over time, so unless there's anything else, we're gonna look to adjourn.
I just want to say thank you all. Again, I know this is kind of a culmination of some hard work and some conflict, and I appreciate the attention and time, feedback and participation of all. Really good.
Thanks, everybody.
Everybody.
We're done.
Thank you. Thanks for
Okay.
hosting us.